Welcome to the Heart of Law podcast. My name is Mirena with Mirena and Company. This episode is a little different because up to this point, I've done these interviews over Zoom because of obvious reasons, the pandemic. This week, we are in Houston, Texas, because we're attending the Mark Lanier event, the Lanier Trial Conference. And I have the privilege to have this interview in person with one of my favorite people in this business. My guest is Keith Givens with the Cochran firm. Keith, welcome to the show.
It's good to be here.
Thank you for making the time. Keith is managing partner and shareholder of the Cochran firm. He has been a civil trial lawyer for consumer and injury victims for over 35 years.
40, but who's counting?
40. You need to update your website.
That's how out of date it is. It's at least 5 years out of date.
A founding partner with Johnnie Cochran Jr., Keith has managed the firm's national operations and growth since 1988. Keith has obtained over $1 billion in case verdicts and settlements for his clients. He obtained Alabama's highest verdict for a single wrongful death of $25 million. He was also the plaintiff's attorney in the $700 million settlement of an environmental case, the largest settlement in Alabama at the time. Keith, it's great to be here in person with you. In the 10 years that I have known you, you have been just a class act, very respectful, very focused. And the work that you do is impactful, not only to the people that you represent, which the results speak for themselves, but the work that you do within the industry is so meaningful that it doesn't go unnoticed. So from a personal standpoint, I'm grateful for what you've done for me because you've always supported me. You've always tried to find ways to get me in front of the right people at the right time. But also just generally speaking, thank you on behalf of the industry and what you do for everyone.
You're very kind and overly generous in your comments, but I enjoy what I do, and you deserve everything you get, and you contribute a lot to our industry and our vertical and our space. So I want to thank you for that. And this podcast is going to be a very interesting legacy of yours.
Thank you. Well, I want to contribute to the legacy of the people who are out there, fighting the good fight. And it's just been so much fun for me to do it. The people that I get to speak to have lived incredible lives, including like yourself. So I want to start at the very beginning. Okay. Tell me about your early beginnings and where did you grow up and why did you want to be a lawyer?
So how far do you want me to go back in?
As far as
high school? I was raised in a very small town. The population was about 1,500. Mm-hmm. And I went to school in the same schoolhouse for 11 of my school day years. Mm-hmm. And I think for the most part, at least from age 12 to 19, I worked at my family's gas station. And matter of fact, I was born in an apartment above the gas station. Wow. So that's where it all started. But my dad had me at a very early age interacting with people. My job, I didn't have a very glamorous job. My job was to pump gas, fix flats, change the oil, wash the cars. And it was a full service gas station. So that was my day-to-day job.
When did you start working?
At age 12, is when he would get me up on Saturday mornings and start me off that way. And then I would also go over after school. It was only a couple of blocks from the school. So I would literally just walk over the tracks because our gas station was on the other side of the tracks, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And so I would walk over the tracks to the station, work until closing time, and then ride home with my dad.
Wow.
So that's how it started. And then my senior year, I moved to the big city, which only had a population of 70,000, and finished high school there, where I actually met my my wife, which of 36 years. But we didn't date in high school. We met, we're in the same classes. Didn't start dating until 10 years later after we had finished school.
Wow.
So that's how that process started. I did not know any lawyers, and there were no lawyers in my family. Actually, I was the first person in my family to have a college education.
Wow.
So I didn't have a history, and it seems like doctors breed doctors, lawyers breed lawyers. And
so what bred you?
Well, I think at least from an early, the education was important to my family, and so getting the education. But actually, I went to school to be a chiropractor. That's what I thought I wanted to be. The only problem is I was attending the University of Alabama, which had no chiropractic school, and I didn't discover this. I'm at registration talking to the advisor, and this was 1974. And they ask you, what are you interested in studying? What do you want to be? And I said, a chiropractor. I don't know why I wanted to be a chiropractor. And then, of course, the counselor just stared at me in the face and said, I'm sorry, we have no courses that we offer for being a chiropractor. And so I selected psychology and business, which were, diametrically different. And then I ended up getting a bachelor's degree in psychology, a bachelor's degree in business, and then went to graduate school of business at Georgia Tech. And it was my professor at Georgia Tech that, when he found out, before I took the GMAT, which was the graduate management admissions test, I had taken the LSAT as a practice, having no desire to go to law school, didn't know anything about law school. And one of my professors taught me just applying it to law schools. I applied to 3 or 4 law schools and had gotten accepted into the law schools, still had no interest. And it wasn't until a professor at Georgia Tech in the School of Business discovered that I had been accepted to law schools in the fall. And he insisted if I was interested in business that I should go to law school. And he drove that into my head enough that I think the conversation was so late. I had not turned down the University of Alabama School of Law. I had not turned them down. I turned down the other schools, and I'd left that one open. They had actually started school, and I had not reported. So when I left the semester as I finished up, I was 2 days late. In other words, they had already started school for 2 days. So I just backdoored my way into law school at the University of Alabama. And then from, I'd say somewhere after my first year, still wanting to go back and finish my master's degree in business and be a business person, I changed my mind and said, I might try this law thing out. And so that's how it was. I do not have a story that I always wanted to be a lawyer. I did not.
It was accidental almost.
It was totally accidental. And even when I, got out in my first year of practice, I didn't know what lawyers did, even the different lawyers. And I just had started out in a defense firm. So this insurance defense firm for this 1 year period of time, and you get your cases as a defense lawyer in the mail. I mean, they come in big manila envelopes from the adjusters and from the insurance companies. And it gives you the facts and the accident reports and those kind of things. And you sort of build your relationships in a different environment, of which I did not gravitate to. And matter of fact, the first case I tried was I got my law license on Friday. Now, if I had not got my law license, I don't know what would have happened, but started the trial on Monday. And it was representing a power company in a dispute over a huge oak tree that this family had in their family for 2 generations. And it was a family in a real rural community, and this power line company, while they were off, and the tree sat in the front yard of this house, and it shaded the entire house. And it was, pretty much dirt area, and they were sharecroppers on this farm until they ended up buying the home and their family and had it for 2 generations. And what happened is the power company, as part of their easement, decided upon themselves. And we're talking about an oak tree that was, I don't know, seemed like 8 feet thick. I mean, it was a huge oak tree with leaves everywhere, just providing tremendous shade.
Yeah.
Instead of cutting the limbs off the tree, they cut the tree down at the root and had ground the root up. So when this family came home after working, they found, no shade, no tree, and it was fairly significant. Now, the only problem with that fact situation and scenario is I represented the power company.
Oh,
and that was the first case that I tried. So I did not have the commitment, and I had more, greater identity with the victim and the family, and it stayed pretty much consistently that way until I left the defense practice. Now we ended up, getting a hung jury, which I was thankful for, because later I was able to resolve the case by paying a lot more than not just the tree, the entire land. It was almost like a land purchase that the power company had to do to make right. But I was, even in that case, I saw that I was becoming more of an advocate for the plaintiffs on the other side of the cases. And so I made a transition. And for the last 40 years, I've been a plaintiff lawyer.
Yeah. What's interesting is that even though it does sometimes feel what happens to us is accidental, what is actually the people that we encounter, the seeds that are planted along the way, even though we're not completely aware at the time, we are sort of being led towards if we're in tune enough, we're led towards what our heart is pulled towards. And having the humble beginnings that you have, which seems to be somewhat of a trend amongst a lot of successful people who have really are self-made, you're a self-made man, is that you come from this compassionate, humble, wanting to make it, wanting to make a difference, and identifying with people suffering. And I think that's beautiful because you can see that in you, in the work that you've done over the years. It's very obvious, in the language, in the way that you feel about the attorneys that sometimes you're on a panel that you talk about their success stories. There is always these threads of similarity in all of you all, and all of the attorneys that I meet. So, and I can relate because I feel that I have been lucky enough to see how wonderful people do in this business in terms of coming from nothing and building something that's absolutely great. So how did you meet Johnnie Cochran, and how did you make that transition into that world, and what was that like for you?
Well, the world was pretty much the same. I mean, so there was not a real major transition. But by 1998, and that was, 17 years. I've been practicing about 17 years.
Yeah.
I was the incoming president-elect of the Alabama Trial Lawyers Association. And there was a lawyer by the name of Jock Smith, who was on the executive committee of the Alabama Trial Lawyers Association. And we were at a conference in Birmingham, and his firm was based out of Tuskegee, Alabama. He lived in Montgomery, but practiced in Tuskegee, which is a famous town in Alabama. And we were talking about doing he's an African-American attorney. We were talking about doing a diverse law firm in Atlanta, because our firm at the time was Cherry, Gibbons, Peters, Lockett, and Diaz. We had 28 lawyers. We were located in 2 states and 4 cities. So relatively small, but we were established tort lawyers, plaintiff lawyers. And we were going to combine with his office to open an office in Atlanta. So it started with that relationship with Jock Smith. And Jock he was Alabama's version of Johnnie Cochran, if you can picture that, except he was more fancy in his dressing. I mean, he was, his colors of suits were much more colorful, and he could get away with it. And he was from New York originally, and he went to Tuskegee as an undergraduate, and then he went to Notre Dame Law School, and then came back to Tuskegee to practice. And he had quite an unusual history and story himself. Jock lost his father at the age of 8. His father was taking the deposition of an opposing party when he was killed in his office.
Oh my gosh.
Yes, and it was,
It's a
tragic.
lawyer's nightmare. Biggest nightmare, right?
Well, it was awful,
Yeah.
from a
Yeah.
childhood standpoint.
Wow.
And Climbing Jacob's Ladder is a book that Jock wrote about that. So he had, quite a history and also an outstanding trial lawyer, a huge resume of success. So he was popular and famous in Alabama.
Yeah.
A federal judge had introduced Johnnie Cochran to Jock Smith after Johnny's book. He was on a book tour. Alabama was part of the book tour, and this federal judge said, "You need to meet Jock Smith." And he, Johnny, that is, and Jock Smith became close personal friends. They would do Super Bowls together, jazz festivals together, and those kind of events from a personal standpoint.
Right.
So Jock mentioned to Johnny when, they were at Windsor Court, it's a hotel located in New Orleans. They were at a jazz festival. I get a call on a Friday night from Jock wanting to know if I could come down and just, meet with Johnny, and for he and I to talk about what we were going to do in Atlanta. And I had things going on with my sons, the next day, and they're in their pre-teens at this time. Yeah. So I could not come down on Saturday. I said I can come down on Sunday afternoon. And so I went down. Johnny stayed an extra day. Jock wanted to see what Johnny thought of our idea. And I was having an opportunity to meet Johnnie Cochran. We did not do criminal defense cases. And as it turned out, neither did Johnnie Cochran. I mean, he had not handled a criminal defense case in probably 15 years before the OJ trial. Right. Now, in his earlier trial history, he had handled like 8 or 9 capital murder cases in a row and won them all. So he was very accomplished as a criminal defense lawyer. I did not, other than news at night, I didn't follow the trial, but everybody was familiar with Johnnie Cochran. So I was looking forward to meeting Johnnie Cochran. Yeah. So I didn't anticipate that conversation, which lasted about 7 or 8 hours on the second floor of Windsor Court, and outside the elevator lobby, there was a lounge, and we sat in that lounge, and he asked every question you could imagine about my history and what I had done, what our practice involved, and allowed us to interact with him or me to ask him questions about himself that I didn't know. And the first thing about Johnnie Cochran that anyone would be impressed with was his humility. I mean, he was not the image that you would see in the courtroom. Extraordinarily humble, kind person, a very family oriented, very very motivated to be more concerned about who you were and what you were doing than he was in trying to impress you with who he is. Of course, as a lawyer, everybody recognized him as the best there was, on the planet, which is saying a lot. He distinguished himself to be that as a result of his skill set. It wasn't manipulation or theater or anything else. It was just
he was a man with a heart, and
he was more prepared than anybody else.
Yeah. So what I've read about Johnnie Cochran is that this is a man that believed that what he did for a living was his calling, and that a single dedicated man can use the law to change society. That is the culture that he had created as an individual for his practice, for his business. Is that what you were attracted to in terms of finding a culture that wasn't everywhere, like it was very unique? You find somebody that's so passionate. Were you pulled to that, or was it a hybrid of business and heart, or what made you want to join and become part of that team?
Yeah, and there's a lot in answering that, and I'm going to try to sum it all of that. All of what you said plus some. I think the initial impression of Johnny was to meet him, to be around him, to find out what he was like. It was very simple. It was very basic. There's no ulterior motive. At all. And then you're overwhelmed by his presence. And his skill set and his his heart and his commitment and his sense of excellence.
Yeah.
He represented a level of our profession that you rarely see. And when you do, you want to be as close to it as you can.
Yeah.
And we gravitated to one another from a personal standpoint, set up follow-up meetings. And then, as you started checking the boxes, I mean, obviously he had a monstrous brand. I mean, it was billions of dollars invested in the Cochran firm, Johnnie Cochran. I mean, you see it every day for like 18 months. I mean, you couldn't imagine what it would take to build a brand like that.
Yeah.
But the man, I think, was the real overriding reason is like, you cannot, given an opportunity to practice with him, which he was proposing to us. I know when he heard what we wanted to do, he wanted in on it.
Yeah.
The surprise and shock related to that, invited us out to California to see his operation. He came into Alabama to see ours because we'd built up an administrative structure to support multiple offices, all doing tort work in multiple states. And so we had a little, compared to what we have now, it's like a small infrastructure.
Yeah.
And then when you take what he had built, he had 10 lawyers in California, but he was located in New York. And there were only two lawyers in New York, but he was working with the Innocence Project. He was also on Court TV. He was in the end of his second book. I mean, so he had a lot of lives. He was on boards because of his significance as a legal leader.
Yeah.
And then he was a speaker. He was Forbes magazine, I think, listed him the #2 speaker behind James Carville and Mary Matlin together that year. He made like $8 or $9 million, which back in those days, as a speaker for 1 year, that's the life he had. It was very, very diverse, very legal focused, but he wanted to get back into what he had known, and that was being a trial lawyer. So his passion spilled over. We spent a lot of time getting to know one another, from a private standpoint. We went on a couple of retreats in a short period of time where we had our families and we would interact and we would work for 4 to 6 hours, and then we would sightsee for 4 to 6 hours.
Yeah.
And we did that enough to really get to know one another from a professional and a personal basis.
Yeah.
And every box you can imagine to check, Johnnie Cochran checked them. And I only had like a couple of boxes he could probably check for me.
Yeah.
But it was from that opportunity that we grew to what we are now.
Yeah. So when he died in 2005, you were left with this company, with this organization, with the brand, with his legacy. Tell me, walk me through that time when, Johnnie Cochran passed away. What did you feel that you had to do justice to who he was and how he had lived?
Well, to start with, we're still doing that. Sure. So if you keep that in mind, I mean, that's something that has not stopped.
It was just
we recognized
the shock of that time, I guess.
Well, the diagnosis was very unexpected. I mean, he was diagnosed with having a brain tumor, pretty much associated with the use of analog cell phone usage. That's what his neurosurgeon said. And he had a tumor behind his left ear. In the diagnosis in 2004, and he lived maybe 14 months after the diagnosis. Came as a shock, because we had him on a program of annual examinations with the Mayo Clinic extensively.
Yeah.
We had significant insurance, and they required even further medical examinations extensively, which we were proud to have, and this is for a period of years.
Yeah.
And he checked out as perfect health. The entire time. He was 64, almost 65 at the time he was diagnosed.
Yeah.
And it was very, very surprising. And what happened specifically is he was in New York. And, by this time we had, private jet planes that seated 12. We had cars on the East Coast and West Coast and drivers that would drive him. The East Coast driver was Ernie. The Ernest was the West Coast driver. It just so happened they had similar names.
Yeah.
They were not similar individuals.
Sure.
The New York driver was a former police officer, about 6'5". The LA driver was, the opposite. He was maybe 5'5",
Yeah.
and he was in his 20s. I mean, so that you can't really confuse these individuals. He had finished, Johnny had finished a mediation the day before where he was, and the lawyers that were in the room said he was spot on 100%, flawless in his delivery, his communication, at being Johnny, and, accomplishing his legal task.
Yeah.
The next day he gets on the phone and he is talking to Ernest in LA, thinking he is in LA. He's actually in New York, and he should have been calling Ernie. Ernest, when he got off the phone, could tell that there was something wrong with the recollection of what Johnny was having, and immediately talked to the office there. He went straight to the doctor that afternoon, which they diagnosed brain tumor.
Yeah. Wow.
So back to your core question, your original question, we did have 14 months to prepare, and the best preparation we had came directly from Johnny himself. The first thing he did after the diagnosis was summon all the partners to LA. And he said, and he's pretty much laid out what he wanted to do. And he used the term even earlier. He didn't use the legacy term. He used generational equity. He wanted a firm that reflected society, and he wanted us to build generational equity. Now, I'd never heard the phrase or didn't have any concept, but in his definition of that, he wanted something that transcended his life, obviously, and that he wanted it to, when he says reflect society in terms of diversity and every other manner, he wanted, if we were in a city that's had 60% African-American population, he would expect that there be 60% African-American attorney population. And so he had that kind of groundwork and footprint. We had probably at the time maybe 14 offices. So we were a robust firm with a lot of talent, because Johnny handpicked the lawyers in the firm, and a lot of the relationships came from the inner circle, which were already recognized as some of the top tort lawyers in the country. And that's who he wanted us to combine with or affiliate with, and we did. And we had some very, very strong lawyers in our firm that knew how to implement and execute a succession plan. And we had the foresight and the documents, thanks to Johnny's East Coast and West Coast lawyers, to put us in a good footing in preparation. But one of the most important and touching things was his willingness to get in front of the camera, even having been diagnosed with a brain tumor and knowing the prognosis. He's a very, very smart person. So he knew what the prognosis was. And it was just a matter of weeks that he wanted to get, and we're still to this day using footage of the advertisements and the marketing that Johnny did. And we really argued with him about the necessity of doing it, didn't want to put any stress and strain on him. And we even felt uncomfortable doing it, but he dove in. And I remember one session was 2 days long. I mean, it was just beginning in the morning, going to the end of the day on 2 different days. And to a point, I mean, Johnny had by then, but because of the exploratory surgery that they did, had one side of his hair had been shaved off, and he had an artist, a makeup artist, come in, trim his hair, the backside of his hair, and literally glue his hair in such that it was perfect. And that's the level of commitment that he had in making sure that his law firm family survived him. And so he was our greatest asset and ally. And it was a busy job, because he was, I'd say, for at least 6 or 8 months of the 14 months, he was still engaged as he was, starting to decline medically.
That's just an incredible story. Thank you for sharing that. I didn't know that. What I'm curious to ask is he created a diverse team, right? And this is the 70s, 80s, 90s. There's still racial tension, still there is today. How did he navigate that? And what was his vision for transcending the cultural, racial differences between, the team that he had, the team members that he put together?
Well, his entire practice revolved around assisting the community, as he referred to it generally. And then we were referring to the minority community or the Black community specifically. Even when he was the number 2 person in the district attorney's office, and he prosecuted bad cops then. So he gravitated from that history into a private practice that handled his civil verdict records were on chokehold cases, police abuse cases, taser death cases. I mean, he was doing what you see in the forefront of civil rights today, representing Geronimo Pratt, who was a Black Panther leader who was wrongfully convicted. He stayed on that case for 28 years until he got the freedom of Geronimo Pratt for his wrongful conviction. So Johnny's level of passion about what you see in the civil rights, I regret we do not have a Johnnie Cochran today with that level of leadership and significance. And he would be, totally, absolutely in the front. We do have lawyers. Matter of fact, we were the National Law Journal's, as a firm, Civil Rights Law Firm of the Year, based on last year we tried, not the current year, but the last year we tried 9 civil rights cases involving police abuse. It was an extraordinary passion for Johnny and an important part of what our practice was to be. But because when we met Johnny, we were primarily a referral-based firm handling products liability cases, medical malpractice cases. We had begun handling environmental cases, big environmental cases, and class actions. So we were expanding into the area, and he sort of kept his roots involved in the firm. And then, and we did pick up mass torts. I mean, Johnny, matter of fact, the first significant mass torts made perfect meeting, Johnnie Cochran spoke at the conference and helped draw the crowd. And our interest in our firm's involvement in mass torts made perfect, and the conferences that now take place in mass torts was part of Johnny's passion and Fred Levin's passion. 2 of them knew each other in the inner circle and had, brought that friendship and that partnership and relationship into the conferences that, we see today. And my relationship,
which makes so much sense.
Well, it does. It connects. I mean, this is a Johnnie Cochran relationship. I mean, the same thing with, my relationship with Mark Proctor and Mike Papantonio and formerly Fred Levin.
Right.
We miss
Mark Lanier.
Mark, Mark Lanier.
Yeah.
I mean, these are all relationships that were started because of Johnnie Cochran.
Yeah. Wow. That's amazing. So, the Cochran firm has, $35 billion of verdicts and settlements over the course of many, many years.
50.
Okay.
Firms,
you definitely need to update your website.
I'm 40, but Johnny predated, and that was in private practice. The firm existed before me. We overlapped some. We overlapped maybe 17 years before we combined.
Got it.
And then there were 10 years before that that Johnny was involved in the private practice that I wasn't. So that is the firm. The firm we have is Johnny's original, Johnnie L. Cochran Jr. Esquire. That is the not just the predecessor firm. That is the legal entity that is the connection to. And it was then became Cochran, Cherry, Givens, and Smith, and then it became the Cochran firm. So that's the evolution, but it dates back to Johnny's first private practice.
So 50
now he was in public. He did some public stuff before that. So I don't. He would have, but it's 50 years. This past year is 50 years. Remind me to give you a coin. I have a Cochran firm. 50-year celebration coin. So I don't remember what the original question was, but
the original
50
question
years.
is it 30? So what I was referring to was the amount of verdicts and settlements.
Over that period of time.
Over that period of time.
It's 50 years.
So 50 years. So is that $30 billion, $40 billion, you think, in terms of what the firm has generated and
settlements and verdicts?
And settlements and verdicts, which is a great number. But the reason why I'm mentioning it is because when you see a number like that, you realize the impact that's been made in people's lives, in society, which is really what he wanted to do. He wanted to impact society in a meaningful way, which he did. So tell me about sort of the future. What is the firm working on currently? What are some of the key issues that you are all passionate about, that you are pursuing now and envision yourself pursuing in the near future?
Well, we're trying to broaden the civil rights focus because of the need. And it's not just it's civil rights and criminal rights. So the next conference that the Cochran firm is sponsoring will be in the spring in Atlanta.
Okay.
It's the Civil Rights and Criminal Rights Legal Conference.
Yeah.
And so that is part of the passion. We are also going to expand in a criminal defense. At one time, we had a huge body of lawyers that did criminal defense. For a variety of reasons related to the civil lawyers, that was changed, but we had as many as 250 attorneys doing criminal defense work in our firm at one time. Wow. Now we had taken, I'd say, maybe 2006 or 7. We went almost strictly civil plaintiff. Yeah. So we're going to, and we've always had some of the high profile cases that we'll occasionally do. So we're going to probably expand there a little bit, but our core and our continued focus on what we do well and enjoy is not going to change. So we're still doing products liability, medical malpractice. Matter of fact, some of our offices, I'd say 4 or 5 of our 43 office locations only do medical malpractice. Yeah. So we're still extremely committed on the medical malpractice cases. Obviously, mass torts. We're not as deep into mass torts as a firm that only does mass torts, but we have done mass torts since tobacco. It was probably some of it Fin, Breslin, Baycall, Vioxx. I mean, we date back to some of those original projects, and we continue to do mass torts, and we will probably always do mass torts as long as there's mass torts available, because you can do a lot of good in a very, very significant way. Same thing on class actions. Our firm has a team of lawyers that try class action cases and have tried class action cases to verdict, which a lot of the firms that historically are known for class actions are not trial lawyers. I mean, they're not criticizing them, but they're mostly paper pushers in the class action area. And there's nothing wrong, because there's a lot of paper that needs to be pushed. You got to push the paperwork. But the basic tort work that we do, we are not changing any of those practice areas, and because our lawyers that's what they're trained and skilled at. A lot of lawyers that are a lot better than I am. Fortunately, at my age, I'm able to say that over time. So I'm not as necessary, nor am I the best lawyer in my firm to be in the courtroom on most case types. Yeah. And so we also, I think from a future standpoint, are doing things as a practice section, not just offices, not just a firm. We have one firm, but we have multiple offices. We're doing work as practice sections where we take multiple offices and combine their skills and talents to push projects forward. Much like different firms combining and doing various projects, we're able to internally do that, whether it's big truck cases or and it helps to have a footprint in the 21 or 22 states that we're in to be able to serve clients, not just based on the skill of a practice area, but we have people who are licensed in those jurisdictions. That I'd say over the last 10 years, we've tried to perfect that.
Wow.
And we want to expand on that model where you're not just getting one lawyer, you're getting a team of lawyers. It may be 3 or 4 lawyers, one because he's licensed there, and another one because he's tried those type of cases and gotten good results, and another one because you need the resources, and that's where capital is important to success. So you can't do a lot of good if you're not doing pretty well yourself, because you're not going against companies that are understaffed, or these are companies that will have an army of lawyers and they'll hit you with a stack of paper taller than this hotel we're in.
Deep pockets.
So you have to match up on the capital side. Therein, why we need someone like yourself in the space to help lawyers and law firms out.
To deploy capital. You've kind of evolved us to, I guess, the second part of this interview. And before we do jump into the business of law and how you operate, because you're an amazing operator, I think, I want to talk about that.
And a lot of it, from my standpoint, was it evolved. I didn't necessarily start out with a grand plan at all. And I'm not the best architect at all, because I did have the benefit of some significant, I guess, good fortune, early. And it's an evolution. Even in my practice and in my professional life, I started out like every other trial lawyer. I mean, you try to get a meritorious case. You try to present it in the absolute most competent way you can, with the proper level of compassion and client focus that you can muster. I mean, you've got these layers of a profession, and if you're able to do very, very good for your client, then our system rewards that with the lawyers doing well. And if you reapply that into the same machinery and adding the pieces, and over time, when I started out in private practice doing tort work, it was myself, one other lawyer, Sam Cherry, who's still a partner this very day, after 39 years together, and we shared one secretary who was also the receptionist. And so that's sort of how it starts out. I mean, so it starts out that simple. But we were both business majors, so I was an undergraduate business major, so I knew the language to be able to discuss risk. And this is the tort work is a very high risk business, and it has washed so many people out, because there's high gain, you can argue, but if you are all in on something and that something does not pan out, then you are washed up, finished, bankrupt. We've had a lot of members commit suicide, change their line of work, retire early. I mean, it's a horrible casualties on our profession, and it takes an unusual personality to be a trial lawyer. You can't be averse to. You have to hate losing. Don't get me wrong. You hate it with a passion, but you can't be so afraid of it that you stay out of the courtroom. Right. And our industry, from a business standpoint, is in my opinion, and all across the legal landscape, is the most difficult. It will take the most out of you. It is gut wrenching. It is high risk financially and from a business standpoint, but also from a personal standpoint of what it takes out of you. Now, as any other business principle, there's a curve. The higher the risk, calculated risk, the higher the gain. So you see a lot of success with plaintiff trial lawyers, and that's just those are business principles, established business principles as that reason. But you have to be very, very good at evaluating what the risks are. You never risk more than you can afford to lose. And in the early days, I could afford to, because I had nothing, I could afford to risk everything all the time. And I did. And fortunately, and sometimes it's just circumstance, just good fortune, circumstance, or when you're applying, talent and resources to a project, that it turns out well. And at any given time, there've been a couple of projects in the early days. Had they not gone well, I was done. I mean, I was out just like everybody else. But when you make it, also from a business standpoint, once you become, you never become bulletproof and invincible, because there's always a project that will and can wash you up on the shore. I don't care how great you are or think you are, or because we know members of our profession who are or have been at the very top of what we do. But for business reasons
have fallen from grace.
When it's not, and it's maybe just not only fallen from grace, they have financially collapsed. And so you have to be mindful of that. And then as you get better at making decisions from a business standpoint, and as you get robust, you have to, it requires, and this is one thing that I probably do not like about what we do. It's hard for somebody to hang a shingle and come out of law school. I mean, we have to be concerned with training young lawyers doing what we do. Because if you look around, I mean, I don't know how many people you've interviewed, but how many people under the age of 60 have you interviewed? I mean, they're rare. And that's a big gap.
I mean, I see incredible potential. And I think that part of the reason, I'm interviewing the whys of the industry is so that this is sort of my contribution to the industry is to educate the younger attorneys that are looking for true, real content from a person that's willing to share their failures and their successes and be real about it. It's not a marketing gig. This is real life, and it impacts people. So the fact that you have a handle on that, you're truthful and honest about the highs and the lows is, I think, important to translate to a young lawyer coming in. They need to know what they're getting into, right?
And they need to also embrace, and this is the hardest part in talking to lawyers. They usually, a person will get caught up on the profession of law or the business of law. The people that are in the profession sometimes do not respect and like the people that are in the business of law. The people you may see TV marketing and doing different things to generate business or the type of cases, and vice versa. I mean, sometimes those that generate the business get frustrated of, the trial lawyer, particularly how they talk about one another. So I think it's important that there be a healthy mix and blend and respect and appreciation for who each other is, and a large part, the strengths, and you need the strengths. The mass tort world would not exist without monstrous trial lawyers who are able to put them out. But look at it from another standpoint. You're talking about mass torts, massive people that, you need, not 1,000, you need 10,000, 15,000, 20,000. You cannot generate that number of clients, unless you're Johnnie Cochran. There's some occasions where I attended some town hall meetings where he had 8,000. We signed up 8,000 individual clients as a result of the old-fashioned way, actually talking to your clients. But in a sense, that was marketing too. But the TV marketing lawyers, which should, be paid their dues, because from a business standpoint, they are generating volume business. They are providing a service that a lot of clients would go unserved or underserved if they were not aware of this services. So they do an outstanding job of making the services be known. And it's hard to be everything. You have to find balance in what you do, because there's also, the temptation for bigger projects, more risky projects. Right. And from a business standpoint, that might not, be a prudent thing to do. So there is no combination that works. And even ours, as old as it may be and as robust as it may appear, I mean, we have a lot of the bells and whistles that a business or a company should have. I mean, we have the 24/7 call center, and we have the marketing departments and people that do the content writing, the search engine optimization, all the little things that 10, 15 years ago, they didn't even have categories of people that needed to do all those things. The accounting departments, the HR departments, we have in-house general counsel. But it takes a long period of time to pick up the pieces, all the different pieces you need to be able to provide a service. And if you're in a solo practice,
it's a lifetime evolution. You didn't get here because you figured it out on day one. this has been a journey of, the industry has evolved and these pieces have sort of come together, right?
And I want to be real clear. I have not figured it out yet. So I don't want you to imply, nor, coming from me, that I've figured out anything.
Right.
I'm still trying to figure it out. I care about, figuring it out. And now I'm motivated for other reasons. I have 6 family members in our firm, including 2 sons, a daughter-in-law, a brother-in-law, first cousin. So, and a lot of other relatives who work in the firm in some capacity. So we're all in, from a family standpoint. So I'm looking to the next generation already.
So, look, I completely agree. And, I'm on the same page with you. I have this expression. I think most of the people that I meet that have achieved great things don't see themselves as achievers. They see themselves as they're becoming. So, you're becoming, you're evolving, you're changing. The risk is still there, right? And sometimes you think you have it under control and something changes, on a bigger scale, and it impacts your business. And so you can't possibly calculate all of the things that could happen over time. So you need to stay humble. You need to stay alert. You need to stay open to all of the landscape changes. But from at least where I sit is I see that what you have put in place is sort of the exception to the rule, because you don't find the type of model that you've created very often in our space. It's very hard to run 42 law firms in a way that they're all kind of humming together, right? There's constant adjustments and tweaking. So I think from that standpoint, it is a major accomplishment. And you're only doing things better and refining. And so I think from that perspective, like the audience, people listening, is that this is not a destination. This is a journey, right? It is not something that you could say, I have the formula, here it is, take this and go replicate it, right?
Yes, but, in being real honest with everyone here, I inherited some advantages. Johnnie Cochran and the legacy and what he brought to the table provided a level of glue and stability and branding. A lot of people will, you spend a lifetime trying to build a brand. He did, but I happen to be a custodian of the brand of Johnnie Cochran, so that gives me an advantage and a shortcut, so I'm giving credit where credit is due. I did not, the 50 years that he spent in his life built that brand. I happen to be in the firm that houses his brand and his reputation. And with that, his standard of practice, what he meant to clients, what he brought to clients, it ups all of our game. We have to do a better job. We're going to get criticized and complained about, not as much because of what we did, but what they expect because of what he brought to the table, what he did. And that helps us. Mm-hmm. And so it's, in our firm and in my professional life, to be honest with you, it's not my legacy is not near as important as my obligation to recognize, promote, protect the brand of Johnnie Cochran and the legacy of Johnnie Cochran. And to call it a brand sometimes that's too business demeaning to me. I think what he stood for as a man and what he represented as a lawyer over decades of his service is something that if I spend the rest of my professional career trying to give that honor and recognition and live up to those standards, then that make me happy.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. So tell me about working with family members, because you are a proud papa. You have 2 boys, John and Chase. And Chase is the lawyer, right?
Well, they're both lawyers.
They're both lawyers. Okay.
Yeah. So and John's wife, Jessica, in the firm, she's also a lawyer.
Got it. So tell me, as a father, as a grandfather, what has that been like? Because I kind of have seen that unfold in the past 10 years from a distance, where your sons have been more and more engaged with the conferences, and you all are very close with the Mass Tort Made Perfect, Levin Papantonia firm and the Mark Lanier firm. What has that been like for you to cultivate and then nurture and witness what your family, your sons in particular, have done?
I'm probably more of a witness and an observer than I am a cultivator. And you are
their dad.
I am their dad. I am their dad, and that's probably more important to me, to being their dad and than being their partner.
Yeah.
And more important to me now is my grandsons rather than my sons. I mean, I make no bones about it. Even in terms of their priorities, I'm more interested in the future practice of those three grandsons, and if I have a granddaughter or any other grandsons, them as well. Not that I'm just leaping a generation, but these sons are well into their profession. But it also early was a misperception of their mom and my wife, Carrie. She used to think that we worked together every day. That it must be nice, going to the office to work, which like they thought maybe we were in the same room or something. Right. I have no idea. But we're actually we are all in the same town.
Okay.
We're in South Alabama. We live in Dothan, and that's where we practice from. But even in my early days, there was not a lot. All the product cases and the medical malpractice cases that we were getting, even by referral, were somewhere else. All the work they do is somewhere else. We do very little work, not because there's, we're not getting the work in there. It's because there's very little work of the type we do happening, in a town population 70,000. So we have historically gone other places to get the work. That's true now, and probably 99% of the work they do. So they are going in different places. We're physically not even in the same building. We have about 150,000 square feet of office building doing firm work. One building is does a lot of administrative work for all the other offices. And one son is located in that building. The other son is located in the lawyer office building where all the clients are, all the litigation work, and the paralegals and secretaries. So we interact, we see each other socially, we may have lunch together, but our projects are different. And even from the beginning, I mean, I haven't even tried any cases with them. Now they have tried cases together, and hopefully they'll try more cases together. But one son probably does more business related things now than he does case work related. One son does exclusively case related work. It has been fun. It has not been challenging. I would say there's nothing really, when I say challenging, I'm talking about bad. I mean, we've had a good relationship. We stay in our lanes. We do have interests that are aligned. If one person participates in a regional office, we sort of all do it together. Same thing with the administrative functions, whether it's the conferences or the publications or the associations, because we do network with a body of lawyers, expanded body of lawyers, and that requires a lot of organization and effort. So we're like this conference, there'll be 1,000 lawyers that we have a lot in common with. So we and we do projects with a lot of law firms and a lot of lawyers and a variety of markets. So we need to meet them and be with them. I use the term, it's like speed dating from a lawyer referral standpoint or a lawyer relationship standpoint. And there's 4 or 5 events that we highlight. But when you say 4 or 5 events, maybe 6, that's every other month. You're somewhere
in the country
doing something. And I'm not at all the conferences and activities, but from a family standpoint, it has worked amazingly well. Now my oldest son, John, practices in the office they're only separated by a conference room with his wife. Now that might be a more interesting question to ask. And they do work on common projects, and they will appear in court together.
Wow.
And over time, I think I will, if they'll let me in, I did help select a jury in an early federal court case with John. So I got to, see him work, but even the trial of his cases they're in different places and not in the city in which we live. And it's, and
so you must be bubbling with pride when you see your son just take charge and, work up a case and do everything independently. I mean, that's the hardest thing, I think, for a person, for a parent, I think, from, again, my humble personal opinion, is to translate the work ethic, because you've been successful before your children and with your children, but to translate the work ethic and the discipline so that they can be fully independent in their pursuit of happiness within their careers. Like that is such a fine line, right? Because we know a lot of lawyers whose kids are lawyers, but they kind of depend on, their mother or father for guidance for a very long time. But I have seen Chase and John just do their own thing from early on, and you kind of just let them figure it out. That's just bravo to you for that.
Well, thanks. I mean, I think you're, a roundabout way saying you appear to have stayed out of their way.
You have.
And it's necessary.
It is.
Because it would, I think it's, for lawyers who try to have a second generation lawyer act like, be like them, is a mistake, because the modern day lawyers are different. Number one, they are smarter, they're better trained. I mean, and they, make fun of me for all the things that I can't do.
Right.
I'm,
fresh talent.
I'm still looking, for the reporters, on the wall to be able to do research. And I can't remember the last time I did research. It was probably 35 years ago, because my theory was, and this is my response to them: listen, if you have to do legal research on legal issues, then your case does not have a significant enough facts. If the facts are good enough, you don't need to worry about the law. Now that's ignorant and backwards, and I realize it is, but
that's the old school.
That's the old school.
Yeah,
I mean, if your case is good enough and the facts are good enough, the law does not matter. So I'm not going to ever need to do any research.
Yeah.
And I've been able to survive 40 years of practice pretty much with that philosophy.
Yeah.
But that's not.
Or you hire people, right?
Smarter. That's the reality, even from day one.
Do the legal research for you.
But I'm the first to realize when someone is smarter than me, and that really is pretty much everybody in our firm. They're smarter than me, and I know how to stay out of the way.
Yeah.
I'm fortunate in that, they're ambitious and they're motivated. I don't try to impose ambition. They like different things. And it's not really a purposeful stay out of their way, although it is. I'm aware that I did encourage them to go to law school. I think John, my oldest son, it was a no-brainer. He was in law school. My youngest son, Chase, was a finance major and wanted to get an MBA similar to me. And it was not me that suggested he go to law school. He also ran into a professor because he was interested in banking matters, business matters too. Same kind of situation that I ran into. It was a professor that said, no, if you can get into law school and you go into law school, if you want to do good in business, most leaders in the business world happen to be lawyers.
Yeah.
And so that is a preferred route.
It's true.
Because of the assumption.
It is. Yeah.
And he immediately gravitated to business things as it relates to the law, and he seems to be able to blend that. He does have an understanding of law in which he needs to have, but he's different. In some ways, part of what he does, I do in a different realm. Part of what the other son has done, I have done. I don't do as much, but I still do. Still am interested in it. But I am not as good as either son at doing what they do.
What they specialize in. Yeah.
So I can't, I would not just be presumptuous, I would be wrong if I went in to attempt. I mean, they ask me for advice occasionally, but it's usually, on a piece of a puzzle, and they may or may not take it.
Yeah.
And sometimes they say they won't take it. And I do have a level of comfort knowing that their decision is probably more right than mine. And they have now had a history of success on being more right than me, that we have enough of an understanding.
Unspoken respect.
I stay out of their lane.
I
stay out of their lane. What Chase is doing, whether it's, this conference or bringing lawyers together or providing service to lawyers. We both have a passion to recognize excellence in trial lawyers, whether it's the Hall of Fame, whether it's awards for what they have achieved, whether or not it's, developing relationships or connecting the industry that do work with our vertical, like yourself, providing connection to the right lawyers. We share that passion, but when it comes to the particulars of how everything works, he understands it. He has the machinery to make something happen.
Yeah.
If you say, I want a conference that, that there can be 1,000 or 1,500 attendees, he knows the questions to ask to find out what type of person you want there. How do you want to get them there? And he has, it's also a lot of database building. He understands that. So I stay out of his lane.
Yeah.
Interact with it as just almost like a participant. When I'm at a conference, I'm doing the same thing.
You're a member.
You are. I'm a member. I am doing the same thing that every other attendee is doing.
Yeah.
I'm either networking, developing referral relationships. I'm a participant of the conference.
And you get to be on the podcast with me and hang out. And
thanks to my sons. It's the work that they have done. This sort of goes back to the root thing. People that think that my sons work for me are so off, because I work for them. They've got the vision and the passion. I just try to fit in.
That's great. I think that's the best position that you can possibly be in with your sons. And you clarified the record, so I'm sure whenever they watch this, they will know that everybody should know that you are not you're not the boss.
No,
they are.
No. Their mother's the boss, but she doesn't try to boss them on these things.
Well, with that being said, you were still recognized with a Visionary Award in 2018 by the National Law Journal, an award that was named after you. That is a pretty big deal, right? How do you feel about that? What was that experience like to get that award and see that people are recognizing you for having such wonderful vision for what you do?
Well, given my level of skepticism, my thought is, okay, who needs a favor? Have they run out of awards to give? And is somebody that is more deserving, why didn't they get it? That's my first reaction to it.
You're trying to self-sabotage this award. What's going on here?
No, I don't want to minimize the importance of the people who have gotten the award since me. Betsy Miller, matter of fact, she will be receiving the new award. She's with the firm of Cohen Milstein, a class action antitrust securities firm.
I know Betsy.
She will be receiving the award this summer in New York, where the award is given.
Yeah.
And she is a visionary. She is what she has done with the state attorney generals and being able to work with them and get them on the same page in class action cases is that's a visionary kind of thing. So so I applaud those who have received the award, and I'm honored that it does carry my name. I try to live up to it. It makes me want to think up other stuff. My biggest problem sometimes with having a vision or idea or thoughts, what people do not see are the 9 out of 10 that are just totally, absolutely a waste of time, or bad ideas. I do come up with an occasional idea that may work, not because of anything I do, because I'm not as good at implementation as I am dreaming things up. And so I'm fortunate to have had a history of people who have worked with me for 30 and 40 years.
You've aligned yourself with executors, right? Because dreaming and having the vision, I think that is that's you're coming from a place of creation and passion of being able to feel limitless without boundaries, where you have to do things by the book, right? So you're saying you're aligning yourself with people who have joined the team and helped you execute some of your ideas, right?
Yes, that helps. And also too,
Yeah.
carrying forward. I mean, I live in a relatively small town in South Alabama.
Yeah.
So you can have crazy ideas. I mean, it's like, and either nobody finds out about them until they're not very successful. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not like if you live in the big city like LA and New York and some of these big cities, it can be a public disaster.
Right.
And I also too am careful about capital, because most ideas require capital. You have to have smart capital, and and you represent smart capital and opportunity and ideas.
I try.
And you have a good record of putting those kind of pieces together.
I enjoy it. I mean, not to take away, obviously you received this award. That's an incredible award, but I think I'm inspired by people like you and other attorneys that truly know how to use the financial aspect to drive the mission all the way to the end. It's not just let's just get capital to get a lot of cases to make huge returns. I mean, I am thriving. I am in my element when I am part of a cause that I know that the capital I'm deploying to a firm is going to work on opioid cases or on human trafficking cases, on the sexual assault cases. These are cases that are slowly changing the landscape of our world. And to be part of that is so exciting, is to be able to say, I had a very, very, very small part in the makings of this movement. And I think that is what, shifting back to you with that award that you've received, is you have had desire and heart into these projects that you have then found the resources and brought those resources together so that you can take that cause all the way. And some of those causes will continue way after you and me are gone. But the point is, you're part of that. And I think that's why you're so deserving of this award, is because you're able to put things in place, keeping in mind what the core values are. And you have been talking about some of the core values at these conferences when you speak to younger lawyers and educating the industry. Tell me, what are your core values and how do you use that when you're thinking about a project where you have to bring capital in, you have to bring talent in, you have to bring the tech side into play? What are the values that you are driven by?
Well, that's a complex question.
But you have to be C's, right?
Yeah, you've heard the list.
I've heard the list.
The 5 C's of core value success for trial lawyers, which, and I won't give a seminar talk on it, but it starts with commitment. I mean, I think in order to be successful, you have to be committed to whatever you're going to do. And if we're tort lawyers or trial lawyers, you need to only do that. And I was fortunate enough, early on, that we didn't do anything else, even at the risk of starvation, to be able to be committed to a practice area. You can't be just half in. You can't test a tort out. Same thing on bass torts. You can't say, I'm going to take a few and see how this works. I mean, you have to
I'm going to be a passive investor.
That's right. You have to be committed.
Yeah.
And I think from Johnnie, I learned, the client focused. You have to concentrate on the client. You have to understand this is a service industry. We have to provide a service. It's not about the lawyer. It's not, really about the system. You just sort of have to function within it and use the system. Yeah. It's about the client.
Yeah. And you're serving.
Right. You have to be, you have to not forget that every day, because it's hard sometimes, because you're not seeing the client every day. You're doing other things. And sometimes it's not just a client, it's a bunch of clients who are in a similar situation.
Yeah.
And then you have to have a level of compassion for that, because I think that's, building the sincerity, or if you're not compassionately buying into the cause of whatever client you have, whether it's a criminal defense client that's wrongfully imprisoned, whether or not it's a a tort victim who, lost loved ones. I mean, you have to have a level of compassion, seeing things through their eyes.
Yeah.
And then another C, obviously, is you have to be competent.
Yeah.
I mean, you cannot be unskilled. So you're going to have to surround yourself and not be afraid. I mean, I'm here at a seminar, learning, with a trial lawyer of some level of accomplishment that exceeds the average. I mean, if you just and just giving other intelligent people their dues and learning from them and getting good at what you do, whether it's it's experience, having a proven record of success, you've got to focus on that confidence level, and that's one of the things that separate everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's an overriding sense of community, it's understanding, and this is where the giving back part comes. If you're committed to mass torts, you could care about mass tort causes. If you're committed to civil rights, you should care about civil rights causes. And that makes you a little bit, not just an actionist filing action,
You're
but an
advocate.
activist, an advocate
Yeah.
On the broader causes. Same thing, if you represent a particular community and they've been good to you and bringing cases to you and business to you, you should be good to that community. You should support you should care about what that community cares about.
Yeah.
Whether it's, book bags or, language classes for those that do not speak the language. I mean, it's a variety of ways, but just dial into the community of what you are doing, and that's part of it. And not just giving back; it's giving. I mean, there should be a level of unconditional giving. Because I hear giving back. Yeah, giving back implies that somebody's giving something to you, and you got to give back.
Right.
It's more important to give than it is to think in terms of giving back.
Yeah.
And then on the business side, I mean, you can sort of check some of those practical boxes. Those are the doing good boxes, and the last, I guess, the other box is the capital category. And I know you're smiling because I mentioned capital, but that's also from a broader standpoint. This is a business too.
Yeah.
I mean, there are lawyers who are afraid to say they want to say this is a profession. It is. And it's a noble profession, being a trial lawyer and protecting the right to trial by jury, fighting for the Constitution, everything associated with justice is
noble.
A very extremely noble and very right and very good. Mm-hmm. But if you do not recognize
embody
the business aspect of what we do, you're not going to be well enough financially or otherwise, or even develop the infrastructure to best serve the clients. I mean, you have to have some of that business thought, and I don't want to minimize pure capital either.
Yeah.
You need pure capital because you're going against pure capital. Yeah. And I encourage a lot of lawyers. I mean, they're rich for the summer, as because you'll have tremendous successes in the early part of the year, in the spring, and everything else, and you're rich for the summer.
Yeah.
And if you don't have the business mindset to understand it, well, that doesn't mean I go out and I buy boats, I buy jets, and I have places on the beach and everything else. But then all of a sudden you realize, well, the summer the judges, they're not trying cases, they're not doing it, and then by the fall you're poor.
Yeah.
Because you have not invested in yourself.
Recycled.
You've got to be in the self is the business aspect of it.
Right, developing yourself as one of the things that has been a focus for this podcast for me is what lawyers do to continue their self-development and refine what their goals are, what their mission is, what the things that sound so cliche, but I think are so important. And part of being successful in business is knowing that you are an individual. You need to meet your own needs first and come from a place of wanting the change, wanting the impact to happen for all of the right reasons and not for the quick gains. Because I think people get washed out or washed up, even if they're doing everything right. If that connection, if that spiritual connection is not there, you're out of tune. You get distracted easily, or you're not fulfilled. So part of that is, like you said, the commitment, the wanting to be rooted and anchored in what is extremely important to them on a personal level, you know. So I think bringing focus, the name of the podcast is The Heart of Law. And one of the things that I would like to accomplish through this is to bring awareness to personal development to the lawyers themselves. Is like they do spend a lot of time on causes, on people, on clients, which is absolutely noble and respectable. But there is also the other side, that in order for you to serve, you have to come from a place of being full and investing in yourself and what makes you tick and how you evolve in your values and what's important. So it would be nice.
You should be a trial lawyer.
I think I am. I just don't practice and don't have a degree.
Yeah. You've got a degree.
I am in my world. I think it would be nice to, you know, maybe this podcast evolves into something more where we are truly focusing on the people who are in this industry that are going out to make those changes. So anyways, I went on that was a big footnote. I'm not sure where that came from, but look, I can sit here and talk to you for hours and days because there's so much to discuss. And I find that we have so much commonality in some of the things that are happening, but I know that you have business to run. I appreciate your time so much. I love the work that you're doing. So keep that up.
I don't know how to do anything else.
And again, just thank you for being you. Thank you for being just a good human being with a heart and giving, right? Like your last name.
Fits.
So yeah, thank you so much. And since we're doing it in person, I get to give you a hug.
Oh, great. Thanks for what you do. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you to the listeners and to the viewers that are watching this. Until next time. Bye-bye.